stars had always watched over Earth in silence, but on that particular October morning, they brought visitors who saw humanity not as equals, but as merchandise. The alien fleet materialized above Earth like dark wounds torn into the fabric of space itself, their vessels stretching across the horizon in numbers that made even the bravest hearts falter. Captain Rebecca Stone stood on the observation deck of the International Space Station, her coffee floating forgotten beside her as she stared at the impossible sight before her. She had been an astronaut for 12 years, had seen the Earth from angles most people could only dream of, but nothing in her training had prepared her for this moment. The ships were enormous, each one easily the size of Manhattan, their surfaces covered in strange geometric patterns that seemed to shift and riddle like living things. "Houston, are you seeing this?" Rebecca's voice was steady despite the tremor in her hands. She had always prided herself on remaining calm under pressure, but this was beyond anything she could have imagined. The response came after a long pause, and when it did, the usually composed voice of Mission Control wavered. "We see it, Stone. Every telescope, satellite, and radar system on the planet is lighting up like Christmas. We count 47 vessels in total, positioned over major population centers worldwide." Rebecca's crewmate, Russian cosmonaut Dmitry Volkov, floated up beside her. His weathered face had gone pale, making his gray eyes seem even more striking against his skin. "In all my years studying the cosmos, I never truly believed we would see this day. My grandmother used to tell stories about lights in the sky over her village in Siberia. We thought they were just tales." "They're not just sitting there," Rebecca observed, her analytical mind kicking into gear despite her fear. "Look at the way they're positioned. It's strategic. They're covering every continent, every major city. This isn't exploration, Dmitry. This is an invasion." Back on Earth, in a small military outpost nestled in the mountains of Colorado, Lieutenant James Hartley was having the worst day of his career. The young officer had joined the Air Force hoping to serve his country, perhaps fly some missions, maybe even see combat. But combat against other humans was one thing. This was something else entirely. "Sir, we're receiving reports from all over the globe." His communications officer, Sergeant Rita Okonkwo, called out from her station. Her Nigerian accent grew thicker when she was stressed, and right now it was almost impenetrable. "The ships are deploying smaller craft. Thousands of them. They're heading for the surface." General Marcus Thornton, a man who had served through 3 wars and countless conflicts, stood with his hands clasped behind his back, staring at the massive display screen that showed the incoming vessels. His jaw was set in a hard line, but his eyes betrayed the uncertainty he felt. "Get me the president. And someone wake up every military installation on the planet. If this is what I think it is, we're going to need everyone." The alien pods descended through Earth's atmosphere like falling stars, but there was nothing beautiful about their arrival. They were black and angular, cutting through the clouds with purpose and precision. Inside one of these pods, Commander Throck of the Zeltharian Empire stood surrounded by his squad of warriors. He was tall even by his species standards, his forearms ending in clawed hands that could crush steel. His exoskeleton was a deep purple, marked with the scars of 100 conquered worlds. "Prepare yourselves," Throck's voice rumbled through the pod, translated by the neural implants all his soldiers wore. "These creatures call themselves humans. They are weak, divided, and primitive. The scans show they still fight among themselves with crude weapons. They have no unity, no real strength. We will take the strongest specimens for the labor camps, eliminate any who resist, and be done with this world before their sun sets twice." His lieutenant, a younger warrior named Krill, checked his plasma rifle and nodded. "The suppression fields are at maximum capacity, Commander. Once we land, their nervous systems will be paralyzed. They will not even be able to scream." Throck felt satisfaction ripple through his body. The Zeltharian Empire had harvested resources and labor from 347 worlds. Earth would be number 348. It would be easy. It always was. But as their pod broke through the final layer of atmosphere and the city below came into view, Throck noticed something strange. The humans were not cowering in their dwellings as the preliminary scans had suggested they would. Instead, they were moving with purpose. Vehicles were racing through the streets, not in panic but in organized formations. And on the rooftops, he could see figures taking positions, pointing things toward the sky. "Commander, I'm detecting unusual electromagnetic activity," Krill reported, his voice uncertain. The humans appear to be coordinating their movements across vast distances. This should not be possible with their level of technology. Throck dismissed the concern with a wave of one hand. Primitive radio communications. Nothing that can help them against our might. Begin landing sequence. The pod touched down in the center of what the humans called Times Square in New York City. The suppression field activated immediately, sending out waves of neural disruptors designed to overwhelm the nervous systems of any biological creature within range. Throck and his squad emerged from the pod, weapons ready, expecting to find a field of paralyzed humans waiting to be collared and processed. Instead, they found themselves facing a wall of determined faces. Humans in various uniforms, some military, some civilian, stood their ground. They held their primitive projectile weapons steady, aimed directly at the Zeltharian soldiers. And in their eyes, Throck saw something he had not expected to see on a world marked for harvest. He saw defiance. The moment stretched like pulled wire, tense and ready to snap. Throck raised one of his 4 arms, signaling his squad to advance. Confident that any second now the suppression field would take effect, and these defiant creatures would collapse. But the humans remained standing, their weapons trained on his warriors with unwavering focus. Behind a overturned taxicab, Officer Daniel Park crouched with his service pistol gripped in both hands. His heart hammered against his ribs, but his breathing was controlled, measured. He had been a New York City police officer for 8 years, had faced down armed criminals, had talked suicidal people off ledges, had run into burning buildings, but nothing compared to this. The creature before him was something from a nightmare. All purple armor and too many arms, wielding a weapon that glowed with unnatural light. Beside him, firefighter Sophie Chen adjusted her grip on the rifle she had grabbed from a National Guard depot that had opened its doors the moment the ships appeared. "Why isn't their weapon working?" she whispered, her eyes never leaving the aliens. "They said there would be some kind of field that would knock us out." "Maybe their intel was wrong," Daniel replied, remembering the frantic broadcast that had gone out 30 minutes ago. Scientists from around the world speaking in rushed voices, explaining that Earth's magnetic field and unique atmospheric composition might interfere with certain types of alien technology. It had seemed like wishful thinking then. Now it felt like providence. Throck's confusion was turning to anger. He barked orders in his clicking language, and his soldiers began advancing, clearly expecting the humans to break and run. Instead, Daniel heard a voice boom across the square, amplified by some kind of speaker system. "This is General Thornton of the United States Armed Forces, speaking on behalf of the United Nations and peoples of Earth. You have entered our atmosphere without permission, deployed military forces in our cities, and threatened our citizens. Stand down immediately or we will respond with force." For a moment there was silence. Then Throck began to laugh, a harsh grinding sound that made Daniel's teeth ache. "You dare threaten the Zeltharian Empire? We have conquered worlds beyond your counting. Your weapons cannot harm us. Your resistance is meaningless. Test that theory if you want," came the general's reply, "but you've made one critical mistake. You assumed we were easy prey because we fight among ourselves. You saw division and thought it meant weakness. But there's a difference between siblings arguing and someone threatening the family. You just united 8 billion humans who now have one common enemy. You." Throck raised his plasma rifle and fired at the nearest cluster of humans. The bolt of superheated energy screamed through the air, but before it could strike, the humans scattered with surprising speed. Return fire erupted from a dozen positions simultaneously. Bullets tore through the air, and Throck's shield flickered as the solid projectiles passed through the energy barrier designed to stop plasma and lasers. Not physical ammunition. One of his soldiers went down, struck in the joint where his exoskeleton was weakest. Blue blood pooled beneath him. Throck stared in disbelief. These primitive weapons should not have been able to penetrate their defenses. "Fall back to the pod," he roared. But more humans were appearing now, streaming from buildings, emerging from subway entrances surrounding them. The Zeltharians had superior firepower and armor, but they were outnumbered 50 to 1, and the humans fought with a ferocity born of desperation and determination. High above the chaos, in the command ship that orbited Earth's moon, Admiral Vex watched the tactical displays with growing alarm. Every landing site was reporting the same problems. The suppression fields were not working. Human weapons were proving surprisingly effective. And worst of all, the humans were not surrendering. They were fighting back hard and coordinated. "How is this possible?" Vex demanded, his tentacles writhing in agitation. The preliminary scans showed a divided species constantly at war with itself. They should be easy to conquer. His intelligence officer, a thin creature named Salk, brought up holographic displays showing Earth's communication networks. Admiral, we underestimated their information technology. In the hours since we arrived, they have shared tactical data across their entire planet. Military forces are coordinating with civilian populations. They are using their global network to organize resistance in real time. Vex studied the data, his three eyes narrowing. Their internet. We dismissed it as primitive entertainment and commerce. We did not realize it was a planetary nervous system. On Earth, in a bunker beneath Geneva, Switzerland, Dr. Yuki Tanaka worked frantically at her computer terminal, her fingers flying across the keyboard. The quantum physicist had been pulled from her research lab 6 hours ago and told to help analyze the alien technology. Beside her, cybersecurity expert Hassan Okafor monitored the enemy communications they had managed to intercept. Their command frequency shifts every 40 seconds, Hassan reported, his brow furrowed in concentration. But I think I've found a pattern. If we can predict the next shift, we might be able to jam their communications or even feed them false data. Yuki pulled up another screen showing the composition of the alien plasma weapons. Look at this. Their energy weapons operate on principles we understand. We can create countermeasures. The universities in Tokyo, Mumbai, and Sao Paulo are already fabricating prototype shields based on the same magnetic field principles that are disrupting their suppression technology. Around the world, humanity was doing what it did best when faced with an existential threat: adapting. In Sao Paulo, factory workers were retrofitting industrial equipment to produce armor plating. In Mumbai, software engineers were writing code to hack alien systems. In Sydney, biologists were studying samples of alien blood from wounded soldiers, looking for weaknesses. In Lagos, mechanics were modifying vehicles into makeshift combat platforms. Back in Times Square, the battle had become a grinding street fight. Throck's squad had managed to fight their way to a defensive position inside a department store, but they were trapped. Every window showed human faces, human weapons. His soldiers were running low on plasma charges and 3 were already dead. "Commander, we need extraction," Krill said, his voice tight with fear. "We cannot hold this position." Throck wanted to argue, wanted to prove that Zeltharian warriors could not be defeated by primitives, but pride would not save his remaining soldiers. "Call for extraction, but we will make them pay for every meter of ground." As if in response to his words, a massive explosion rocked the street outside. Throck looked out to see one of the harvester pods erupting in flames. Human aircraft screamed overhead, having somehow adapted their missiles to penetrate Zeltharian shields. In Colorado, General Thornton allowed himself a tight smile as reports flowed in. The aliens were pulling back from multiple sites. They had taken casualties. They had been bloodied. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said to the officers around him, "I think we just showed these invaders that Earth doesn't roll over easy. But this is just the beginning. They'll regroup, adapt their tactics, come at us again. We need to be ready." Lieutenant Hartley looked up from his station. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission." "It's from their command ship. They want to talk." Thornton's smile faded. "Put it through. Let's hear what they have to say now that they've tasted our steel." The holographic image flickered to life in command centers across the globe, showing Admiral Vex in all his alien majesty. His tentacles moved with calculated precision, his 3 eyes studying the human leaders who had gathered virtually to face him. General Thornton stood at the center of the American command post, but beside him on split screens were leaders from every nation. Premier Chen from Beijing, President Okoye from the African Union, Prime Minister Petrov from Russia, Chancellor Müller from Germany. For the first time in human history, every nation stood as one. "I am Admiral Vex of the Zeltharian Empire." The alien's voice came through the translators, cold and measured. "You have proven more resilient than anticipated. However, you misunderstand your situation. We have 47 capital ships, each capable of reducing your cities to ash. We have technology beyond your comprehension. We can still take what we came for, but the cost to your species will be far greater if you continue this futile resistance." General Thornton stepped forward, his weathered face calm but his eyes burning with intensity. "Admiral, let me tell you what we understand. You came here thinking we were weak because we fight among ourselves. You saw our conflicts and assumed we had no unity, but you failed to understand something fundamental about humanity. We are a species that argues passionately about everything, from politics to sports to the best way to make coffee. We debate, we disagree, we sometimes go to war. But when an outside threat appears, when someone threatens our home, our families, our future, something remarkable happens. On the International Space Station, Rebecca Stone floated before a camera, her voice joining the transmission. We stop seeing ourselves as Americans, Chinese, Nigerians, or Russians. We become human. Every person on this planet, all 8 billion of us, we share something you cannot take from us. We share this world, this beautiful, troubled, complicated world, and we will defend it together. Dr. Tanaka's fingers paused over her keyboard as she listened, tears streaming down her face. She thought of her daughter back in Kyoto, just 5 years old, who loved to draw pictures of the stars. She thought of Hassan's family in Lagos, of Sophie Chen's brother fighting in New York, of Daniel Park's elderly parents who had called him crying when the ships appeared. Every human had someone they loved, someone worth fighting for. Admiral Vex's tentacles twitched in what might have been irritation. Sentiment will not save you from superior firepower. We have harvested 347 worlds. Your defiance changes nothing. Actually, it changes everything, came a new voice. President Elizabeth Morrison of the United States stepped into frame, but she was not alone. Behind her stood representatives from every nation, every culture, every corner of Earth. You've harvested 347 worlds, Admiral. Worlds that were divided, unprepared, unable to mount coordinated resistance. But Earth is different. In the 6 hours since you arrived, we have shared every piece of technology, every tactical insight, every resource across our entire planet. Our scientists are working together. Our military forces are coordinated. Our people are united. In Tokyo, factory workers cheered as the first batch of magnetic countermeasure devices rolled off production lines. In London, pilots climbed into retrofitted jets, their hands gripping controls for weapons designed to exploit the newly discovered weaknesses in Zeltharian shields. In New York, Sophie Chen embraced Daniel Park as they prepared for the next wave, two strangers who had become comrades in the span of a single morning. This was happening everywhere. All across the globe, humanity was fighting back. At the Global Defense Headquarters, Hassan looked up from his terminal, his eyes burning with a discovery that could change everything. He turned to Dr. Yuki Tanaka, his voice trembling with a mix of exhaustion and triumph. Dr. Tanaka, I have it. I cracked their command frequency algorithm. We can disrupt their entire communication network. Yuki smiled through her tears, a single act of defiance against the overwhelming odds. Do it, she whispered. Show them that humanity does not surrender. The signal went out, a silent pulse spreading across Earth's ad hoc defensive network. Instantly, the Zeltharian fleet found itself blind and deaf. Their meticulously coordinated invasion dissolved into utter chaos. Ships that relied on constant communication from the command vessel were suddenly isolated, their advanced systems rendered useless, leaving them vulnerable and exposed. On board his flagship, the magnificent but now silent harbinger of conquest, Admiral Vex felt a sensation he had not experienced in decades. Fear. The tactical displays flickered, showing human forces pushing back at every single landing site. His elite soldiers, the conquerors of hundreds of worlds, were pinned down, surrounded, and requesting emergency extraction. His ships, shielded by technology centuries ahead of Earth's, were taking damage from weapons that should not have been able to even scratch their hulls. And now, the backbone of his entire military strategy, his unbreachable communication network, was compromised. Salk's voice, usually a beacon of cold, analytical calm, was quiet, almost defeated. Admiral, he stated, the words hanging heavy in the command bridge. We have lost 42% of our ground forces. The humans have adapted to our tactics faster than any species we have encountered. They are using our own technology against us, modifying their weapons in real time, sharing innovations across their entire planet instantaneously. If we continue this invasion, Admiral, we will take casualties we cannot afford. As if to punctuate Salk's grim assessment, Throck's voice crackled over the emergency channel. a weak signal transmitted from the ruins of a department store where he and his platoon were making a last stand. Admiral, these humans, they fight like nothing we have ever seen. They do not fear death when they fight for their families. They coordinate without formal command structures. They adapt and improvise on the battlefield. They turn our greatest advantages into their own weapons, our strengths into weaknesses. I request immediate withdrawal. I repeat, immediate withdrawal. Vex stared at the holographic display of Earth, that blue and green marble that had seemed so fragile, so vulnerable just hours ago. He thought of the 347 worlds the Zeltharian Empire had conquered, of the countless species that had looked upon his fleet and surrendered without any significant resistance. None of them had been like this. None of them had possessed this inexplicable, illogical quality that made humans so formidable. He turned to his chief strategist, his voice a low rumble of confusion. What do they have that others did not? What is the variable we failed to account for? Salk considered the question, his multifaceted eyes reviewing all the data they had collected in the short, brutal hours of the invasion. He analyzed the combat reports, the intercepted human communications, the frantic sharing of scientific breakthroughs. Hope, Admiral, Salk finally answered. They have hope. Every other species we encountered saw our fleet and understood that their defeat was inevitable. They calculated the odds and surrendered. It was the logical choice. But humans do not accept inevitable defeat. They see impossible odds and they fight anyway. They believe, despite all evidence to the contrary, that they can win. And that belief, Admiral, that irrational hope, makes them dangerous. As if summoned by Salk's words, a new voice filled the command ship's bridge. It was General Thornton, broadcast on an open channel for all to hear. Admiral Vex, you asked what would happen if we continued our resistance. Allow me to show you. In the past 6 hours, we have united our world in ways we never thought possible. Former enemies are now allies. Old rivalries have been forgotten. We have pooled our knowledge, our resources, our courage. You intended to harvest us like wheat, but you have instead forged us into steel. Every hour you remain in our system, we grow stronger, more coordinated, more determined. You have technology beyond our comprehension, but we have something you cannot quantify: the unyielding will of 8 billion souls who refuse to be enslaved. Then, another voice joined the chorus, clear and resonant. It was Rebecca Stone, floating weightless in her station, the beautiful sphere of Earth turning slowly below her. We are teachers and soldiers, doctors and engineers, parents and children. We are flawed and divided, and we make countless mistakes. But we are also capable of extraordinary things when we stand together. Today you taught us that we are not alone in the universe, and in return, we are teaching you that humanity will never bow to tyrants no matter how powerful they appear. The voices of Thornton and Stone, of an entire planet, echoed in the silent bridge. Admiral Vex made his decision. He stood tall, his form casting a long shadow over the command console. Recall all ground forces, prepare for immediate withdrawal. His officers stared in shock and disbelief, their tentacles twitching in protest. But Vex raised a single commanding tentacle for silence. The cost of conquering this world would cripple our fleet. These humans, they are not worth the blood we would spill. Mark this system as forbidden territory. Let the records of the Empire show that Earth is defended not by superior technology, not by advanced weaponry, but by something far more dangerous, a unified purpose and an indomitable will. As the Zeltharian ships began their retreat, turning their backs on the blue and green world, they left behind a planet that was wounded, but for the first time in its history, truly united. Humanity had faced the darkness and discovered its own light, and in the quiet aftermath, as sirens were replaced by cheers, they knew this was not an ending, but a new beginning. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe for more tales of human spirit and resilience.